Hey, it's Chase from On the Table Gaming, and I'm here with Andy Hobday, creator of The Barons War, and Paul Hicks, one of the finest historical miniature sculptors in the world, I might say. So, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you.
So if you haven't checked out our two-part interview with Andy Hobday already about his journey into wargaming and the projects he's been involved with, be sure to check out our previous tabletop episodes for that. But today we're going to be talking about the Barons War, including the most recent mini campaign, Most Ignoble Feud, as well as some previews of upcoming campaigns. Before we do any of that, Paul, I'm really excited to talk with you here. And first off, I consider myself a really productive guy, but looking at the number of miniatures you've put out over the years, and just for this Barons War line, I have to ask, do you have like an extra set of hours in the day? Are you not living 24 hours like everybody else? Like, you're kind of making us all look bad here. What's your secret?
I don't ask for payment until the figures are made. So if I don't work, I don't live.
Fair enough. It's not a necessity there.
Yeah. I mean, I consider myself retired. So if I'm doing something I love, as many hours as I possibly can. So, I get paid for it as well. So every day's, a fantastic day for me. So why wouldn't I work, to be honest?
Fair enough. Well, I mean, I think it comes through in what you're making. The stuff looks amazing, and there's clear passion behind it. And then, Paul, you've also spoken about working in the past with Andy Hobday, and I think you said you worked with him back in like 1997. Was it like a Games Workshop connection?
Yes. Yeah, he used to be my boss when I was a surly shop assistant.
And you decided to still work with him here? Is this
I think we've always stayed friends. Luckily, he kind of moved on to a more managerial role higher up and left the store I was working in. So he didn't really get to know me on a day-to-day basis as much. So I think we stayed at that honeymoon period of when I moved to that shop. So, which is good. It worked out well for both of us.
And it's been a honeymoon ever since, hasn't it, Paul?
Yes, it has. Luckily, we haven't got to see each other one-to-one over the last year and a half for some reason, which is a bonus.
Well, that's fantastic. And I feel like there's like that sort of golden era of like Games Workshop employees that like kind of all moved on to do these great things, and there must have been something going on at that time. And you with amazing sculptures and the minis that you make, and then Andy, you've gone on to create a lot of amazing things. And so today we're talking about the Barons War, right, which is your latest creation. And for me, a big part of wargaming is like telling the story. I think that's kind of what captures the love of gaming in a lot of ways for me personally. And that can be like big or small. Like it could be the whole narrative landscape of like the miniatures on the table with the scenery. Or it could be like, oh, I can't believe my guy rolled, double sixes or, whatever, and didn't make it. And you capture that really well in your games. And I think with Paul Sculpts, those really, also transport you into the setting. So how are you taking things even further with the Barons War now beyond the basic rule set that we talked about last time, using scenery and mini campaigns? How are you kind of trying to maximize the potential of people's gaming experiences here, Andy?
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head, Chase. I like to play stories. So we call that a narrative-driven game, etc. But some people like to have the stories given to them. Some people like to create them. Some people aren't very creative. That's just the way it is, And what we're hoping to do is to take people by the hand and lead them into the next stage of the Barons War by supplying some stories for them. That's the idea. So the Barons War as a period is very rich in history and its background and its characters. It's very characterful. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on a couple of characters and do a mini campaign. So we're going to link 3 scenarios together to start with, and so you'll play them out as those characters. So we feel that's the best place to go next with it.
Why is that actually important to you, though? Like, couldn't you just, make another miniature line or just move on? And, why spend so much time developing this element out?
I think it gives it depth, and I think a game needs depth and it needs support. You know, if we're going to take the time and the effort to create these games, and we're talking about the Barons War in particular at the moment, then I think it needs the support and excitement around it. And spending some time doing that really, really works. Also, to be quite honest, we're enjoying playing it. So it gives us an excuse to play test and fight these scenarios, and also an excuse to make more characterful minis.
Do you think, one of the things I've always been drawn to the properties that you've been involved with is that not only do you work to really make like a compelling experience, but there's a good level of accessibility involved as well. You don't make too many hurdles to get in, and generally there may be times when you're like, you know what, this makes sense for the rules to make it a more, compelling experience. Does the mini campaigns that you're rolling out here, and then maybe we could talk about scenery as well that you guys are doing. Do you find that this is actually a way to get people like introduced into the system and kind of grow with it?
I hope so. I mean, we've released the first one, as you know, and it's gone and been really well received. And the scenarios that we put into that, first one's 500 points, then 750, then 1,000 points. So it's kind of like a mini escalation. Mm-hmm. And if you're new to the game, that first scenario at 500 points is a great place to start. So it'll give you a good chance to fight the mechanics, give it a good go. And each of those scenarios stand alone. So if you don't want to play the whole campaign, you can just take each of those scenarios and play them out with forces of your choice. So in that way, yeah, we're trying to make it accessible. To be honest, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I think historical wargaming can be very non-accessible. I was just thinking of the right word. It's very difficult to get into, and because I think people feel they need to have a great background in history,
right,
a real understanding of the period that they're fighting, and I don't agree. I mean, for me, I did knights because knights look cool,
yeah.
and the whole setting is looking cool. And don't get me wrong, the historical background is really interesting too.
Yeah.
But who doesn't want to be a knight? Who doesn't want to be, if we're talking about mortal gods, who doesn't want to be a Greek hoplite, And back at Test of Honor, who doesn't want to be a samurai? So finding these iconic images through history and then putting them into a game and making it narrative, I think is a very enjoyable thing to do, a very enjoyable pastime, and it makes it accessible, And to be quite honest, we talked about Games Workshop at the beginning. If you sift through Games Workshop's lore, especially in the early days, it's all stolen from history. Yeah. So all of the characters that they've created are based on historical characters. So all we're doing is offering up, I believe, interesting characters who are actually part of history.
And I guess one of the things is, even that idea of accessibility, it's that it doesn't have to be intimidating. And I think that's what comes across with the campaign. One of the things I really liked about the Ignoble Feud was the escalation nature. It's pretty easy then to jump in and have some cool characters if you buy those amazing sculpts that Paul did for these. You get your campaign set and then you build a little force around it. Yeah, totally.
And again, it's accessible in a way that you can dive in as deep as you want or not. So, the reality is if you just want to collect knights because they look cool, paint up a warband, play the game, don't bother with the history, that's cool too. That's fine.
Lots of different entry points. And sometimes like that's, you just see a sculpt and you're like, I must have that. And what do I need to, what rules do I need to do to play this, or how do I do it? For me, I think one of the ones that really stands out, I guess they all do, but Paul, you have your spearmen pack. And one thing I find myself often like rooting for the underdogs. And I feel like your spearmen have this great way of capturing this feel that maybe they're not like an everyman, but they kind of have the man who doesn't have a set of armor protecting them on the battlefield look. And they've got like grimaces, or they're standing like not maybe confidently. It really sets them apart.
Oh, thank you.
I just love that. Now, so when you sit down to design and sculpt a miniature, do you start with like kind of a big picture idea? Does it just like organically come forth from you? Do you use like reference images? I guess there's no photographs of like medieval peasants, but you know.
Things like Osprey books are a massive help. Because first I'll go through sort of Google images and then pull a load of pictures that I can then get a flavour for what they should look like, and then maybe get about 4 or 5 different images, and then pull one bit from one place, and then I like that bag, I'll put that bag on that figure, and then give them sort of something unifying, but at least make them look slightly individual. And also doing sort of grimacing faces is a little bit easier. I mean, they're never going to look happy anyway.
That's true. But, you know, composed to your foot knights, I feel like they're a little bit more, they've got a little more confidence in the way they're standing.
Yeah, I mean, that all comes from sort of what kind of attitude that you want to pass on. Because I remember a quote from Mr. Tamiya before he wrote in a book, and he said, you want to kind of, when you're designing a figure, you want to design the figure not at the start of its movement and not at the end of its movement, somewhere in between.
Oh.
So I try and sort of pose when I can a figure sort of somewhere in between the action from the beginning to the end. So it kind of gives it a little bit of attitude or some sense of where that figure is going or what they're doing.
And so do you just kind of like envision that in your mind? You're like, okay, this guy's swinging a sword. Like, are you walking around the house, like flailing your arms around and being like, oh, that's about where the motion would be? Or,
well, I'll try and, because there's so many sort of living history experts on, say, YouTube or weapons experts, just try and find out what a genuine sword position would be.
Yeah.
Or if it's something 20th century or Second World War, what was the proper drill for using that weapon,
right,
as opposed to, somebody doing a star jump waving around an artillery piece.
Does that really bother you when you see sculpts from maybe other games and you just see a pose and it's like, what is going on here?
I wouldn't comment.
Okay, I'll take it. No comment on that at this time. Fair enough. And so, we've got this Ignoble Feud campaign, and it's a series of three games you can play. You can buy these miniatures; they'll come with the set. When you complete this, though, is that kind of a done deal? Is there a certain like replayability? Can you play it with different forces?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've used the characters that are in there, William de Warren and Gerald Furnival, and they were actual characters they were neighbours. So there is some historical depth to that. However, we've written it in a way that you can just put your own characters in. There's even there's a feud, obviously, hence the name. There's even a table that you can roll up your own feud with your opponent. So you can just set it all up. You can put your own characters in, and you can just select retinues up to those points, or of course use what's in there. So there's some flexibility. I mean, I'd like to think that people would play it through as is, and give it a go as is to just try it out and see how it plays out for them. But then they can just go back round and do it again, or like I said earlier, they could just play each one individually if they wanted to.
Fantastic. And so, this is a really interesting approach you're taking, where it's not just necessarily based around the miniatures, but you also kind of, you've had Kickstarters that are also now including scenery as well. And you've got now a narrative piece, you've got the actual miniatures themselves, and now these sceneries. It's kind of becoming its own like all-encompassing thing. What's the kind of idea behind this?
Paul and I were talking a while ago about play sets from when we were kids, and that's a long time ago.
Allegedly.
Thank you. That's my comment.
When Paul wants medieval sourcing, you just go and you go talk to you and just say, so what was it like here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just going from time. But so where you would get these kits and you would get the scenery in there, you'd get the models in there, and you would play them out. So we thought that it would be great for because the first two Barons War 1 and 2 were about building a range of miniatures that we wanted to release, because it was the only way that we could do it really, was taking it to Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
We thought for the third one we would like to do something a bit different, and the idea for the third Kickstarter was to be this playset. So you would have a bunch of link campaigns, you would have the terrain to play the game in, which is featured in the scenarios, and then all of the figures, the beautiful figures that Paul's created for this, the third Kickstarter, would all be characters within there. So it would be an all-encompassing piece. And again, people can take that, play it as it is, but also the terrain was a village. So here's a village. We then created a medieval village for the Barons War game as a whole, so people can start to take that and run with it. So yeah, it was that was the feeling for me. It was to just create something that was all encompassing.
And I think that speaks to that idea of like making it not so intimidating and being more accessible. Like people can take it or leave it if they've got terrain already, but if you're jumping in, you want to really expand it out. Here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we experimented as well with digital sculpting for the buildings, because we wanted to make them available so people could just download them and print them. I mean, there's so much 3D printing going on these days, just to make it accessible that way too. So we've offered them printed by us in resin, or people can just buy the files, which they've gone out there as well and been well received, and people can then print them off and away they go. So they could create vast villages of hovels if they wanted to.
Just sprawling
flexibility.
Medieval metropolis. It's crazy what 3D printers can do. And so, Paul, as a traditional style sculptor, I come from a family of artists. My mom's a master weaver and my dad makes handcrafted furniture. So it's kind of given me really appreciate a real deep appreciation for skilled, like handcrafted work. What's one of the best things about sculpting miniatures in this sort of traditional style? And then what's like one of the challenges?
I think one of the challenges, apart from making it feel and look authentic to the period, is obviously your casting limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can only do things cast in a certain way, which I've got used to. So I can know how to work a figure in a certain way, or get the most posability, but the easier to cut. For it to be able to be cast.
Has there been miniatures where you've designed something and you're like, this is like how I really want it to be, and you just realize that the casting just can't, really make that happen?
A couple of times, but I think now my brain works in this is how a figure should look.
Mm-hmm.
One, because otherwise it will have to be cast into bits that sometimes a customer wouldn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times it's like, actually that takes a little bit longer. So you've got to then make sure it marries up. While my brain sort of works, that I can sort of produce a figure that fits the remit of the project and also is satisfying for me to look at as well.
Makes sense.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there anything that like you just find particularly rewarding about working in this medium?
I just love, from an early age, my dad made models. We had a model railway.
Mm-hmm.
My mum always did art and stuff. So I've always done something with my hands, craft-wise. So I love working with my hands or cutting bits up and then making new things. And I'm not sure how I would get that same sort of satisfaction from doing something digitally.
Yeah. No, there's definitely that tangible. So this is the embarrassing thing is both of my parents are these artists. And then, of course, I'm like, I don't really have that knack. It didn't stick as well. So here I am doing like digital content. I don't know if that's a thing like you have those skills. Do you have a young apprentice that you...
Well, I don't know. I don't really mix with anyone outside of on a one-to-one to sort of pass on. I mean, my daughter's not that interested either, so it's not like something I can pass on to her.
Fair enough. Yet, we'll see. Well, have you ever made, what's like the largest miniature you've ever made? And I guess when does it stop being a miniature? But what's the largest thing you've sculpted?
Largest thing I've sculpted.
Do you have a picture of like in a sculpture of Andy Hobday in your closet, just like frozen, like Han Solo?
It's actually in this room.
If he pulls over an Andy Hobday right now, I'm going to die.
Yeah. I've cloned Andy Hobday. I don't know where I am on the screen, but was a giant. That was the first thing I ever sculpted.
Oh my gosh. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was back in 95, I think.
It'll be the surprise plot twist ending of the Barons' War in some fever dream. Just like, what?
Yeah. So, that was, I've not sort of thought about parting with that, but that was the first thing I ever did. And probably the largest thing. There is one thing that I have sculpted recently, but I'm not really allowed to talk about it.
Oh.
It's not. It's for a show, so that will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, people will be able to see that soon.
Okay. And Andy, so, upcoming stuff from Warhost here, what other future campaigns might we be able to hint at, or do we have coming?
Yeah, I'm working with a couple of chaps on these besides Paul. There's a guy called Tom Merrigan, and he's doing all the writing at the moment because I'm tied up, not literally, but tied up finishing off the Death and Taxes campaign. So he has given me 12 of these, a brief for 12 we've gone through. So if they continue to be as well received, we'll have a number of mini campaigns. The second one is already done. And the third one has just gone to be laid out. So very excited about both of those. And as you probably noticed in A Most Ignoble Feud, we're able to sneak in a few extra rules as well. So on each of these, we'll keep adding. And for the next one, we're gonna have a taster of some outlaws because we've got William McCassingham involved.
From my understanding, there's like some elements of like Robin Hood tied up with his historical character.
Absolutely, he could be a contender for a real Robin Hood. The only difference is where he was down in Kent harrying the French around Dover in the Weald, what's a place called the Weald, which is a huge forest below London, and it all stretched down to the ports of Sandwich and Dover and around there. And he fought a guerrilla warfare against the French. So we've got him as one of the characters in the next mini campaign. So with a French knight called the Comte de Perche, who was one of the most notable knights from France who came over with Louis. So it's these two are going to face off around the area. So I'm quite excited about that.
That's fantastic because Simon, my often co-host for this program, he always, me having French ancestry, he's always going at it with me. So we, it's like another thing where he gets to be Robin Hood though. Those guys, come on, like what the? Where's the other?
Oh, the Comte de Perche, he's a real character.
Oh, so, I'm sure Simon will fill me all in about it many times.
I think if you're going to play him, I think you get the better deal.
Okay.
He was very unlucky though. He did die eventually at the Second Battle of Lincoln, and he was offered to yield, but he wouldn't.
There we go.
So
stubborn.
He fought to the death. Yeah, he fought to the death, and both sides were very sad that he died.
I'm sure. And so, I think that kind of ties in with some of the amazing sculpts that Paul has done as well. And I'll just flash an image here on screen. I just absolutely love your Merry Men sculpts there, like talking about capturing the feel. This is one of those, like, you don't, even if you're just passing through and you're like, I don't really play historical things. You're like, oh, well, I guess I have to buy these now. Like,
they're beautiful, aren't they? They're beautiful. Yeah, we were, Paul and I were talking that they could quite easily be transposed into Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you can have that feel. I don't know, they're cool for that. I think they're... and that John, yeah, man, absolutely fantastic. So I'm looking forward to painting some of those up. And so that will be kind of the premise of this upcoming campaign.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We've the outlaw list, because William Cassingham, he's obviously classed by the French as an outlaw. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're on King John's side, he's actually quite a hero. But we've added in, we created a whole faction list for outlaws for the Death and Taxes campaign, which was from the Third Barons' War. So when that finally drops for the backers in September, there'll be a whole section of the book, a third of the book, all about outlaws. So there's loads of different types of outlaws you can take. We've got some characters in there. There's some obviously William Cassingham's in there, but we've also snuck him into the mini campaign. We got Robin Hood's in there, and Fox Fitzwarren, who's another guy, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to give it all away, but they're in there. Yeah. But what we've done is we've taken some of those warrior profiles, some of those troop types, and we've stuck them in the second mini campaign, so people can start playing with outlaws and get used to the feel of it.
Absolutely fantastic.
To give people a taste.
And
sorry, go on.
Now, when you're looking at these miniature ranges too, sometimes it's kind of it's fun to explore certain spaces, and I know Paul's talked about in the past, some of the bolt action going into like World War I and making miniatures. When you notice there's maybe a space that isn't necessarily given full service or the proper service, and being able to address that, and there's lots of room to kind of explore in some of these historical periods. Paul, are there any periods or ranges of miniatures that you're that's still maybe on like your bucket list, or you're like, you know what, I think we could flesh this out a little bit more, that need the Paul Hicks touch, No,
I don't really. There's always sort of ranges that I'd like to do. I think I'm more enthused about the range I'm doing next as opposed to the one I'm doing at the moment. But that's always because I'm sort of infused for the next thing.
Yep.
But no, not really. I kind of love being given the freedom by, the people I work for to do different periods.
Yep.
Which means to sort of be kept on my toes a lot and, don't get bored. Except for I'm not that keen on doing sort of ancients or anything like that. That doesn't really interest me. But, once to sort of start diving into something and then looking into, I'm not more of a period, it's more how they look interests me as opposed to the history. I'm that kind of, I want to be able to convey something from 2D into 3D.
Yeah. Well, I think you do that really well. Do you have any input with Andy when it comes to some of the namings of things, though? Because like Death and Taxes, this is kind of some gloomy stuff here. Can we get like some sunshines and rainbows? Is that an upcoming Kickstarter, maybe?
Well, I did, but he didn't use what I thought.
Fair enough. And then what's this? For many people,
mine was much better, but he didn't go with it.
And what's going on for those maybe not in the know? Something that often seems to pop up in the Barons War Facebook group is this Basketman. And can we get a little bit of information about that? And then when is that forthcoming? Is that an upcoming release, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the Basketman himself, he's come from some medieval art, and what it is it's this big wicker basket that it's a real thing. I had to go and check to see it. There's a basket that they would wear. They're actually big enough to get inside with eye holes, and they would wear them at sieges. So they would run around with them, and as they got shot at with arrows, they drop the basket down and hide inside it, then pick it up and run again. And for some reason, Basketman's become quite popular in the group.
So, free Halloween or masquerade balls or whatever, or just, are you going to be making costumes like this for real size? I think you guys got to test it out. How do we get footage of that? You could, Andy, get it, and Paul could throw things at you. I think we're talking viral hit here. Like, come on.
I'd be up for that. That'd be quite fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for throwing things.
Yeah, I thought you might be. I promised the guys in the group that they can have Basketman when we grow to a certain size, but Paul and I did have an idea that we were going to do it was yours, wasn't it, Paul? Idea to do a Kickstarter for Basketman.
Yeah, Basketman and Kickstarter. If they want it that much, then they'll back a Kickstarter for that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a niche I haven't seen filled in any of the miniature ranges. So
I mean, it'd be quite fun. I mean, you could do. I just had those sort of comedy. Where people are hiding it under haystacks in like a cartoon or a comedy, and they lift it up and then they just scuttle.
Absolutely.
And then yeah. And you could do like a range of half figures in various, and then you just plonk your basket on top. See how. I have thought how I would do it.
All right, this is very reassuring.
We could do some rules for him. Yeah. I was talking to Tom about doing a mini campaign on doing Siege. So if we do that, we'll have to sneak Basketman in, I think.
Absolutely, we demand rules for Basketman. Let's go. Well, so it sounds like 12 of these mini campaigns. So that's roughly could be something like once a month. Is that the plan to roll these out?
It is, yeah. We got one. The second one's due this month, which is July. So towards the end of this month, just need to get the figures painted. They're all done, and the third one will pit, like I say, it's all written, ready to go. It pits King John against, I think it's King Andrew Andrew's afterwards, William, of the old King William of Scotland. So it's a bit of border conflict, so that's quite cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing the miniature for that, Paul, no pressure. When he's done. No, because he's gonna look old and dumpy. Because he's
not older figure.
Yeah, I wasn't on about you. I was talking about figure. Yeah. So he's still in his prime, but he's gonna be quite old. So he'll be quite an interesting figure to have done. So yeah, they'll give us a real opportunity to add some special characters to the game, I think, and I think also because Paul and I are. The next year when we do our next Kickstarter, it's not going to be in the same location as in set in England. We've done 3, like I say, the first 2 were to flesh out the range, and the third one was to give this play set, this Outlaws versus the Sheriff of Nottingham, etc. We're going to move on next time is the plan. So I think these campaigns will fill in and keep that location very exciting as we move on to somewhere else.
Absolutely amazing, just a kind of approach to that topic. Will it stay within the Barons' War?
I think it'll stay in the same period, is what we're talking. But I think it's like the worst kept secret now. We're going to go over the sea, so we really want to go and do not the Crusades, because I don't want to have a Kickstarter based around the Crusades, but I'd like to do one based around the Crusader states. Over in Outremer, because they were quite established by this period, 1215, 1217 and later. It will use the same rules, but we will do a supplement based over there. So we'll get all the holy orders in.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
The actual local barons in, because obviously Antioch's a principality at that time, Jerusalem's a kingdom, so there's different. You've got the kingdom of Cyprus. Excuse me. So there's lots of interesting characters. I mean, it's, if you've seen Kingdom of Heaven, it's kind of based after that period. So the family of Evelyn are over there. They're quite big big name. So we will do, you know, the Evelyn family, etc. So we got lots of ideas of what we want to do, but we're also the difference is there's two sides.
Right.
So we really want to do all of the actual nations that are there. So start to look at the caliphate nations, etc., and start to do that kind of stuff is what we would like to do.
And that introduces a whole new like kind of look and feel then, because I mean we're just talking about how great these spearmen look, and we have our knights here. You're kind of geographically shifting enough there that we're going to see a really different style.
Yeah, and we, you know, Paul and I were talking about this. We can take a lot of this already and take it over there because they would look very similar. However, where we've got the knights are look very English, you know, at the moment, we can start to put French, Spanish, Nordic knights, you know, all of that with the changes in the helmets. So the kind of the technicality of the equipment will be very similar, you know, chain and shield and stuff, but it'll take on a very different style. And I also like to think that they would have drawn from the native style as well.
Yeah.
So we can start to mix that in. But more importantly, we'll get to do some really cool Arabs. And that's what I really want to do.
Oh, man. And that, you know, that I'm trying to think back here, and hopefully my story, that might even bring in some like silks and other really cool cloths. How is that? Is that, are certain styles like particularly challenging, Paul? Like, is it more,
I think every range is pretty challenging for like the first 8 figures, and once that's established, then I'm sort of in. I've caught the feel, or what I'd think I've caught the feel and how they should look, and it starts to become a bit sort of more natural. So there's normally the odd sort of discarded figure from the beginning. But actually, you go saying about if there's a range of figures I'm looking forward to doing, I think definitely Arabs has always been one that I've wanted to do, but I've never had the chance to do. So
we got some great ideas, haven't we, for them as well already?
Yeah,
but we don't want to give anything away.
Fair enough. Well, we're looking forward to, because that sounds fantastic, and you know, I'm just gonna one more time to the sound of sounding too much like a fan. I love the way you're rolling this out. Like, I love the way you're tackling it as a playset with scenery, with the miniature range, and then also having the existing support coming out with campaign after campaign. That's not only great for keeping you know, your community engaged, but it's also really helpful for helping us rebuild communities in person. And this idea of kind of coming back to the table to play games after, you know, a lot of communities have had challenges over this past pandemic year, and now we're starting to rebuild up, and you know that you could still be collecting your miniatures and painting them, but now you're coming in and wanting to play, and it's like now there's stuff to do. We can meet up and we can have these monthly campaigns to run through and bring others in. And I think it's really important to work on building communities up in this way, and for companies to support communities in doing this. And it really helps to also grow the historical community. And I think that's really, really key and really smart that you guys are doing that. So
thank you. Yeah, I was going to say something pithy then, but I don't think that's the right place. No, I agree. And I also think it you know, in that vein, we've forgotten how to play, you know?
Yeah.
And organising a game. So everything that we can do to help people get back playing and gaming would be great. I mean, we're definitely going to do an open day over here once we I think we're opening back up on the 19th of July. So I think August, September time, we'll do a big Barons Wall Day. We'll just get people down and we'll show them how to play, and we'll have some videos and tables and games and scenarios and just interact with everybody. It'll be the first one we've done. And I'd love to do that every year. I'd love to have a Barons Wall Day or weekend every year. Where people can just come play, ask questions. You know, we'll if people want to play competitively, we'll set that up as well. You know, so yeah, no, I think that's the way forwards. I think it really is.
And we would actually be able to get to meet, because we haven't even met apart from over Zoom, have we? Since the first Kickstarter, have we?
No, we I saw you last at Salute.
Yeah, 2019.
That was it. 2019.
Oh my gosh.
2 years, mate. That's shocking.
Andy,
it could be 50 years, couldn't it?
Andy's got to come over there and unlock the door so you can get out there and stop making all these miniatures.
Maybe he needs to stay locked in because we've got a secret squirrel project on the way as well, haven't we, Paul? So you need to stay in there for a bit longer.
Well, we're excited, and thanks so much for coming on to talk about what you're doing with the Baron's War, and we love the stuff coming out of Warhost. Of course, for people to connect with you, checking out Warhost online. The Baron's War has a great Facebook page. There's obviously the Andy Hobday Facebook page where we can follow you along there. And then Paul, I follow you definitely on Twitter. Are there other places people should look to connect with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, my Facebook one is normally a lot of miniatures and a lot of rugby stuff. So you'll have to filter that.
Sounds good. We'll have to pick your brain about that in a future episode here. After the Basketman, throwing things at Andy, then we'll have your rugby match off, and then we'll do a series here.
Yeah, use him as a tackle back.
That's it. I think we got a series here, guys. Basketman, rugby, and then he can do some Aikido, and you'll each step outside of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah. Then I get to wear the Basketman for the Aikido.
Well, once again, thanks so much for coming on, and for everyone listening, make sure you check out the Baron's War if you haven't already, and if you're already in the community, you know how awesome it is. And in the meantime, hope you get your miniatures on the table.